It's our 50th episode. We've shared over 40 different titles with you over the last several months. We look forward to continuing this journey with you. Stay tuned for another great episode of Let's Get Cozy, because it's story time with Kiyaya and Daniel. Today on Let's Get Cozy, our 50th episode, we're joined by two of my former students. One is back again to read some more of Tuck Everlasting, and another is a new host. Her name is Elizabeth Treanor, and she is a graduate of Fordham University and is currently enrolled in Lehman College. She graduated from Fordham in 2016, and she's working on completing her master's degree at Lehman now. She's currently a high school mathematics teacher. She currently teaches algebra, and she'll be teaching advanced placement calculus next year. Elizabeth, I will definitely not be in that class with you. She remembers fondly reading Tuck Everlasting in class with her. And she still loves, just as she did when she was my student, the Harry Potter books. Elizabeth says that sometimes the most difficult part about reading is getting started. But once you get started, it can be even more difficult to put it down. I agree. We are joined also by Maggie Faldetta. She's back again to read some more of one of her favorite books from my class, Tuck Everlasting. She's currently enrolled in Monroe Community College, and she's working towards her degree. She's a stay-at-home mom and a tattoo artist, and she remembers being engulfed in Tuck Everlasting in my 6th grade class. She loves to read scary books, and Stephen King is one of her all-time favorites. Maggie says that reading is so important in keeping your imagination going. Keeping your imagination going is important for keeping your mind young and sharp. So sit back, relax, and join Kiyaya, Daniel, Elizabeth, and Maggie for our 50th episode of Let's Get Cozy, because it's story time with Kiyaya and Daniel, as forever Thursdays and Fridays continue. Are you a singer, an actor, an artist, a crocheter, a knitter, a cross-stitcher, a potter? Are you a crafter? Coming soon to Rude Rangers TV is Crafty Conversations with... That's right, my outspoken friend Kiyaya and I are going to be launching our new show on Rude Rangers TV this spring. Email us at craftyconversations@STITCHINGwolfdesigns.com if you're interested in sharing your story with us. Follow us on our social media accounts. Or check our website out, www.STITCHINGwolfdesigns.com, or give us a call, 516-274-0350. The possibilities are endless. Stories are such an important part of our lives. Join my friend Kiyaya and I for Get Cozy, because it's story time with Kiyaya and Daniel, where we share some of the greatest picture books and chapters from children's and young adult literature to inspire you to keep embedding literacy into your days. I'm Daniel, and Kiyaya and I are here to share this all with you.
Suit came into the sunlit parlor. He stood for a moment, looking around at them all, May and Miles, and Jessie and Tuck, and Winnie too. His face was without expression, but there was something unpleasant behind it that Winnie sensed at once, something that made her instantly suspicious. And yet his voice was mild when he said, "You're safe now, Winifred. I've come to take you home." We was going to bring her back directly ourselves, said Tuck, standing up slowly. She ain't been in no danger. You're Mr. Tuck, I suppose, said the man in the yellow suit. I am, said Tuck formally, his back straighter than usual. Well, you may as well sit down again. You too, Mrs. Tuck. I have a great deal to say and very little time for saying it. May sat down on the edge of the rocker, and Tuck sat too, but his eyes were narrowed. Jessie said uneasily, Who in tarnation do you think you— But Tuck was interrupted. Hush, boy, let him speak his piece. That's wise, said the man in the yellow suit. I'll be as brief as possible. He took off his hat and laid it on the mantel, and then he stood tapping his foot on the littered hearth facing them. His face was smooth and empty. I was born west of here, he began, and all the time I was growing up, my grandmother told me stories. They were wild, unbelievable stories, but I believed them. They involved a dear friend of my grandmother's who married into a very odd family. Married the older of 2 sons, and they had 2 children. It was after the children were born that she began to see that the family was odd. This friend of my grandmother's, she lived with her husband for 20 years, and strange to say, he never got any older. She did, but he didn't. And neither did his mother or father or his brother. People began to wonder about that family, and my grandmother's friend decided at last that they were witches, or worse. She left her husband and came with her children to live at my grandmother's house for a short while. Then she moved west. I don't know what became of her, but my mother still remembers playing with the children. They were all about the same age. There was a son and a daughter. Anna, whispered Miles. May burst out. You got no call to come and bring us pain. And Tuck added roughly, You got something to say? You better come to the point and say it. There now, said the man in the yellow suit. He spread his long, white fingers in a soothing gesture. Hear me out. As I've told you, I was fascinated by my grandmother's stories. People who never grew older. It was fantastic. It took possession of me. I decided to devote my life to finding out if it could be true, and if so, how and why. I went to school. I went to a university. I studied philosophy, metaphysics, even a little medicine. None of it did me any good. Oh, there were ancient legends, but nothing more. I nearly gave up. It began to seem ridiculous and a waste of time. I went home. My grandmother was very old by then. I took her a present one day, a music box, and when I gave it to her, it reminded her of something. The woman, the mother of the family that didn't grow old. She had a music box. May's hand went to the pocket of her skirt. Her mouth opened, and then she shut it again with a snap. That music box played a very particular tune. The man in the yellow suit went on. My grandmother's friend and her friend, Anna, was that the daughter's name? They'd heard it so often they knew it by heart. They'd taught it to my mother during the short time they lived in the house. We talked about it then, all those years afterward. My mother, my grandmother, and I. My mother was able to remember the melody finally. She taught it to me. That was nearly 20 years ago now, but I kept it in my head. It was a clue. The man in the yellow suit folded his arms and rocked a little. His voice was easy, almost friendly. During those 20 years, he said, I worked at other things, but I couldn't forget the tune or the family that didn't grow old. They haunted my dreams. So a few months ago, I left my home and I started out to look for them, following the route they were said to have taken when they left their farm. No one I asked along the way knew anything. No one had heard of them. No one recognized their name. But 2 evenings ago, I heard that music box. I heard that very tune, and it was coming from the Foster's woods. And the next morning early, I saw the family at last, taking Winifred away. I followed and I heard their story, every word. May's face drained of color. Her mouth hung open, and Tuck said hoarsely, "What you gonna do?" The man in the yellow suit smiled. "The Fosters have given me the wood," he said, "in exchange for bringing Winifred home. I was the only one who knew where she was, you see. So it was a trade. Yes, I followed you, Mrs. Tuck, and then I took your horse and went directly back." The tension in the parlor was immense. Winnie found that she could scarcely breathe. It was true, then. Or was the man who stood there crazy too?
"Horse thief," cried Tuck. "Get to the point. What are you going to do?" "It's very simple," said the man in the yellow suit. And, as he said this, the smoothness of his face began to loosen a little. A faint flush crept up his neck, and the pitch of his voice lifted, became a fraction higher. "Like all magnificent things, it's very simple. The wood and the spring belong to me now." He patted his breast pocket. "I have a paper here, all signed and legal to prove it. I'm going to sell the water, you see." "You can't do that," roared Tuck. "You got to be out of your mind." The man in the yellow suit frowned. "But I'm not going to sell it to just anybody," he protested. "Only to certain people, people who deserve it. And it will be very, very expensive. But who wouldn't give a fortune to live forever?" "I wouldn't," said Tuck grimly. "Exactly," said the man in the yellow suit. His eyes glowed. "Ignorant people like you should never have the opportunity. It should be kept for certain others. And for me, however, since it's already late to keep you out, you may as well join me in what I'm going to do. You can show me where the spring is and help me to advertise. We'll set up demonstrations, things that would be fatal to anybody else, but it won't affect you in the least. I'll pay for your assistance, of course. It won't take long for the word to spread, and then you can go your way. Well, what do you say?" Jessie said dully, "Freaks. You want us to be freaks. In a patent medicine show." The man in the yellow suit raised his eyebrows, and a nervous petulance came to his voice. "Of course, if the idea doesn't appeal to you," he said, blinking rapidly, "you needn't be in on it. I can find the spring and manage just as well without you." But it seemed the gentlemanly thing to make the offer. "After all," he added, looking around at the cluttered room, "it would mean you could afford to live like people again, instead of pigs." And that was when the tension burst. All four Tucks sprang to their feet at once, while Winnie, very frightened, shrank back into her chair. Tuck cried, "You're a madman, a loony. You can't let no one know about that water. Don't you see what would happen?" "I've given you your chance," shrilled the man in the yellow suit, "and you've refused it." He seized Winnie roughly by the arm and dragged her up out of her chair. "I'll take the child and be on my business." Tuck began to rave now. His face stretched with horror. "Madman!" he shouted, and Miles and Jessie began to shout too. They crowded after as the man in the yellow suit dragged Winnie through the kitchen to the door. "No," she was screaming, for now at last she hated him. "I won't go with you, I won't." But he opened the door and pushed her out in front of him. His eyes were like blind fire points. His face was twisted. Then the shouting behind them stopped abruptly, and in the midst of the sudden silence came May's voice, flat and cold. "You leave that child be," she said. Winnie stared. May was standing just outside the doorway. She held Tuck's long-forgotten shotgun by the barrel like a club. The man in the yellow suit smiled a ghastly smile. "I can't think why you're so upset. Did you really believe you can keep that water for yourselves? Your selfishness is really quite extraordinary, and worse than that, you're stupid. You could have done what I'm about to do long ago. Now it's too late. Once Winifred drinks some of the water, she'll do just as well for my demonstrations. Even better. Children are much more appealing anyway. So you may as well relax. There's nothing you can do to stop me. But he was wrong. May lifted the shotgun. Behind her, Miles gasped, "Ma, no!" But May's face was dark red. "Not Winnie," she said between clenched teeth. "You ain't gonna do a thing like that to Winnie. And you ain't gonna give out the secret." Her strong arm swung the shotgun round her head like a wheel. The man in the yellow suit jerked away, but it was too late. With a dull cracking sound, the stock of the shotgun smashed into the back of his skull. He dropped like a tree, his face surprised, his eyes wide open, and at that very moment, riding through the pine trees just in time to see it all, came the Tree Gap constable.
Winnie was standing with her cheek pressed into Tuck's chest, her arms flung tight around him. She trembled and kept her eyes squeezed shut. She could feel Tuck's breath come and go in little gasps. It was very quiet. The Tree Gap constable knelt over the sprawled body of the man in the yellow suit, and then he said, "He ain't dead. Leastways not yet." Winnie opened her eyes a crack. She could see the shotgun laying on the grass where May had dropped it. She could see May's hands, too, hanging limp, clenching, then hanging limp again. The sun was scorching hot, and near her ear a gnat whined. The constable stood up. "What did you hit him for?" he wheezed resentfully. "He was taking the child away," said May. Her voice was dull and exhausted. He was taking the child against her will. At this, the constable exploded. "Ding dang it, woman, what you trying to say? Taking that child against her will? That's what you done. You kidnapped that child." Winnie let go of Tuck's waist and turned around. Her trembling head stopped. "They didn't kidnap me," she said. "I came because I wanted to." Behind her, Tuck drew his breath in sharply. "You wanted to?" echoed the constable, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You wanted to?" "That's right," said Winnie unflinchingly. "They're my friends." The constable stared at her. He scratched his chin, eyebrows high, and eased his own shotgun to the ground. Then he shrugged and looked down at the man in the yellow suit, who lay motionless on the grass, the blazing sun white on his face and hands. His eyes were closed now, but except for that, he looked more than ever like a marionette. A marionette flung carelessly into a corner, arms and legs every which way, midst tangled strings. Then one glance she gave him fixed his appearance forever in Winnie's mind. She turned her eyes away quickly, looking to Tuck for relief. But Tuck was not looking back at her. Instead, he was gazing at the body on the ground, leaning forward slightly, his brows drawn down, his mouth a little open. It was as if he were entranced, and yes, envious, like a starving man looking through a window at a banquet. Winnie could not bear to see him like that. She reached out a hand and touched him, and it broke the spell. He blinked and took her hand, squeezing it. "Well, anyway," said the constable at last, turning businesslike, "I gotta take charge here. Get this feller into the house before he fries. I'm telling you now, if he don't make it, you're in a pickle. You people. Now here's what we'll do. You," he said, pointing at May, "you gotta come with me, you and the little girl. You gotta be locked up right away, and the little girl, I gotta get her home. The rest of you stay here with him. Look after him. I'll get back with the doctor quick as I can. Should have brought a deputy, but I didn't expect nothing like this to happen. Well, it's too late now. All right, let's get moving." Miles said softly, "Ma, we'll get you out right away." "Sure, Ma," said Jessie.
"Don't worry about me none," said May in the same exhausted voice. "I'll make out." "Make out?" claimed the constable. "You people beat all." this feller dies, you'll get the gallows. That's what you'll get. And if that's what you mean by make out. Tuck's face crumpled. The gallows, he whispered. Hanging? That's it, said the constable. That's the law. Now, let's get going. Miles and Jessie lifted the man in the yellow suit and carried him carefully into the house. But Tuck stood staring, and Winnie could guess what he was thinking. The constable swung her up onto his horse and directed May to her own saddle. But Winnie kept her eyes on Tuck. His face was very pale, the creases deeper than ever, and his eyes looked blank and sunken. She heard him whisper again, "The gallows?" And then Winnie said something she had never said before, but the words were the words that had sometimes heard and often longed to hear. And then Winnie said something that she had never said before, but the words were words that she had sometimes heard and often longed to hear. They sounded strange on her own lips and made her sit up straighter. "Mr. Tuck," she said, "don't worry. Everything's going to be all right." The constable glanced heavenward and shook his head. Then, clutching his shotgun, he climbed up behind Winnie and turned the horse toward the path. "You first," he barked at May. "I gotta keep an eye on you. And as for you," he added grimly, speaking to Tuck, "you better hope that feller don't die on you. I'll be back as soon as I can." "Everything'll be all right," Tuck repeated slowly. May, slumped on the back of the fat old horse, did not respond. But Winnie leaned around the constable and looked back at Tuck. "You'll see," she said. And then she faced forward, sitting very straight. She was going home, but the thought of that was far from her mind. She watched the rump of the horse ahead, the swish of coarse, dusty hairs as he moved his tail. And she watched the swaying, sagging back of the woman who rode him. Up through the dim pine trees they went, the constable's breath wheezing in her ears and emerging from the coolness and the green. Winnie saw again the wide world spread before her, shimmering with light and possibility. But the possibilities were different now. They did not point to what might happen to her, but to what she herself might keep from happening. For the only thing she could think of was the clear and terrible necessity. May Tuck must never go to the gallows. Whatever happened to the man in the yellow suit, May Tuck must not be hanged, because if all they had said was true, then May, even if she were the cruelest of murderers and deserved to be put to death, May Tuck would not be able to die.
Winnie pulled her little rocking chair up to her bedroom window and sat down. The rocking chair had been given to her when she was very small, but she still squeezed into it sometimes when no one was looking, because the rocking made her almost remember something pleasant, something soothing, that would never quite come to the surface of her mind. And tonight she wanted to be soothed. The constable had brought her home. They had seized her at once, flinging the gate open and swooping down on her, her mother weeping, her father speechless, hugging her to him, her grandmother babbling with excitement. There was a painful pause when the constable told them she had gone away of her own free will, but it only lasted for a moment. They would not believe it, and her grandmother said, "It was the elves. We heard them. They must have bewitched her." And so they had borne her into the house, and after she had taken the bath they insisted upon, they fed and petted her and refused, with little laughs and murmurs, to accept her answers to their questions. She had gone away with the Tucks because, well, she just wanted to. The Tucks had been very kind to her, had given her flapjacks, taken her fishing. The Tucks were good and gentle people. All this would have been swept away in any case. However, this good impression of her friends, which she was trying to create, which she told them what they had happened to the man in the yellow suit, had they really given him the wood in exchange for finding her? They had. Well, perhaps he wouldn't want it now. May had hit him with the shotgun. He was very sick. They received this news with mingled hope and horror, and her father said, "I suppose the wood will be ours again if that man should. That is, if he doesn't." "You mean if he dies?" Winnie had said flatly, and they had sat back shocked. Soon after, they had put her to bed with many kisses, but they peered at her anxiously over their shoulders as they tiptoed out of her bedroom, as if they sensed that she was different now from what she had been before, and if some part of her had slipped away. Well, thought Winnie, crossing her arms on the windowsill, she was different. Things had happened to her that were hers alone and had nothing to do with them. It was the first time, and no amount of telling about it could help them understand or share what she felt. It was satisfying and lonely, both at once. She rocked, gazing out at the twilight, and the soothing feeling came reliably into her bones. That feeling, it tied her to them, to her mother, her father, her grandmother, with strong threads too ancient and precious to be broken. But there were new threads now, tugging and insistent, which tied her just as firmly to the tucks. Winnie watched the sky slide into blackness over the wood outside her window. There was not the least hint of a breeze to soften the heavy August night. And then, over the treetops, on the faraway horizon, there was a flash of light. Heat lightning. Again and again it throbbed without a sound. It was like pain, she thought, and suddenly she longed for a thunderstorm.
She cradled her head in her arms and closed her eyes. At once the image of the man in the yellow suit rose up. She could see him again, sprawled motionless on the sun-blanched grass. "He can't die," she whispered, thinking of May. "He mustn't," and then considered his plans for the water in the spring, and Tuck's voice saying, "They'd all come running like pigs to slops." And she found herself thinking, if it's true about the spring, then he has to die. He must, and that's why she did it. Then she heard the hoofbeats on the road below, a horse hurrying to the village, and not long after there were footsteps and knocking on the door. Winnie crept out of her room and crouched in the shadows at the top of the stairs. It was the constable. She heard him saying, "So that's that, Mr. Foster. We can't press no kidnapping charges since your little girl claims there wasn't no kidnapping. But it doesn't matter now anyway. The doc just got back a few minutes ago. That feller, the one you sold your land to, he's dead." There was a pause and the murmur of other voices. Then a match striking. The acrid smell of fresh cigar smoke. "Yep, she got him a good one, all right. He never even come to. So it's an open and shut case since I seen her do it. Eyewitness. No question about it, they'll hang her for sure." Winnie went back to her room and climbed into bed. She lay in the dark, propped up on pillows, and stared at the lighter square of her pillow, at the heat lightning throbbing. It was like pain, she thought again, a dull pain on the fringes of the sky. May had killed the man in the yellow suit, and she meant to kill him. Winnie had killed a wasp once, in fear and anger, just in time to spare herself a stinging. She slammed at the wasp with a heavy book and killed it. And then, seeing its body broken, the thin wings stilled, she had wished it were alive again. She had wept for that wasp. Was May weeping now for the man in the yellow suit? In spite of her wish to spare the world, did she wish he were alive again? There was no way of knowing, but May had done what she thought she had to do. Winnie closed her eyes to shut out the silent pulsing of the lightning. Now she would have to do something. She had no idea what, but something. May Tuck must not go to the gallows.
Elizabeth and Maggie, phenomenal reading. Love how you read those chapters out loud and can't wait to hear your concluding episode tomorrow. Join us again as Forever Thursdays and Fridays continue on Let's Get Cozy with Kiyaya and Daniel.